First off, I'd like to say Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. Thank you for your love and your self-sacrificial love for your kids. This is a Hallmark holiday, which I don't always subscribe to, but it's also a scriptural holiday, so that I can get down with. So I wanted to, before we get into the message, tell you guys that we have received in April, we received about $13,000 in tithes and offerings, whether through checks dropped in the mail slot at the church, or if you went to enclavecc.com. And I have to say, I was so blessed by that. When I was told that we had received almost our normal budget in tithes and offerings, it blessed me so much because it shows the faith you guys have in a time of uncertainty, in a time of with a lot of kind of fear and a lot of people saying that there was a lot of bad things that were going to happen, and our church stepped up and showed the type of faith in God that is really, really rad to see. And so anyway, I was really blessed by that, and I wanted to let you guys know, I just want to say thank you first off, and let you guys know that you guys are awesome. And I don't know the whole breakdown of who gave what and all of that. I don't mess with that. I just saw the total number, and I saw that it was pretty close to our operating budget. And so thank you guys so much. Just like Paul, when he wrote to the churches and he would thank them for their gifts and their sacrifice for his well-being, I'm thanking you guys for your gifts and your offerings, because they help us keep from having to do things that we don't want to do, and we're able to keep, hopefully, our staff feeling secure and not having to worry about where they're going to get their next meal. So really appreciate you guys a lot. With that being said, we're going to jump into today's message, and it's a Mother's Day message. Happy Mother's Day. I asked 4 moms in my life. I kind of gave them a survey. I said, hey, can you guys give me 3 things that you would tell other moms, 3 things you would tell dads, and 3 things that you would tell kids for Mother's Day. And I told them I need help brainstorming what my message should be on, which direction I should take it. And so I did that, and there are 4 moms that I'm very close to, that I know that they're real moms. They're the type of moms that they might not be Instagram or Facebook moms where everything is picture perfect all the time, and they're like in their kitchen with their Subway tile doing like slime projects with their kids. Maybe that happens, and that's okay. But these are the moms that, like, I know, like the dirt on them, and they're godly women, and they're real, and they've got like dirt under their fingernails at the end of the day from like playing with their kids and loving their kids, and they're moms who get frustrated at their kids, and it's not just all fake. They're real moms. And so I asked them for those things, and I'm going to read to you what kind of a summary or a synthesized version of what those moms told me, because I think it's just so rich. That's going to be at the end. But what happened was, one of those moms was my mom. I, of course, asked my mom. And so the answers to the survey that she gave me started me reflecting on how blessed I am to have my mom in my life, to have a godly mother the way I do. And so that, along with, I've had this quote stuck in my head. It's actually from an NFL draft podcast. If you ever listen to Bucky Brooks and Daniel Jeremiah, who's the son of David Jeremiah, the famous pastor of the mega church. Anyway, Bucky Brooks said, give people their flowers while they're living. In other words, honor the people in your life while they're still here. Don't wait for a funeral to share the impact they've had on your life. And so with that kind of floating around my head and me reflecting on my mom being such an amazing mom, today I've decided to preach on Exodus 20, verse 12, because I need a text, because I'm a pastor, and I can't do things without having a text. So we're gonna have a text, but it's just one verse, and it's honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. And Paul quotes this text in Ephesians, and he says this is the first commandment with a promise attached to it. And so it's a thing to honor your father and your mother. It's in both the Old Testament and the New Testament. It is universal. And so today, as we celebrate Mother's Day, I want to honor mothers, but particularly my mother, for being such an amazing mom. And I would encourage all of you to do the same, whether by letter, email, or phone call. Don't just give flowers and say Happy Mother's Day, whatever, but be detailed in how they've blessed your life, how they have been your rock in your time when you needed one, how they've been your motivation when you've needed motivation, how they have reeled you in when you needed someone to reel you in. Tell them those things. Be specific. Maybe your mom isn't the godly woman that mine is. That's okay. Everyone goes through this life and has their own process. And actually, I think you'll be able to learn a little bit from my mom once I get started sharing. And so this day is not a total bummer for you. Or maybe you've lost your mom. And maybe this day is particularly difficult for that reason. I can tell you that my mom lost her mom before I was even born. My mom was in her early 20s when her mom passed away. And so you can hopefully learn something from her in that way as well. And I can tell you that she would show appreciation to the women who filled that role in her life. My paternal grandma, my dad's mom, helped fill that role. And then once we were at the church that they are at still, Peggy Hinton, who's gone on to be with the Lord more recently, was there to disciple and mother my mom in many ways, though my mom didn't meet her until her mid-30s. So you can reach out to those women as well, the people who have filled that role in your life. So if this day doesn't seem like a particularly sentimental day to you, you can find the people who have filled that role for you, and you can thank them and honor them today, because God has put those women in your life for a reason, and so you can thank them. So beyond Mother's Day, beyond the fact that I would like to honor my mom, I really think there's two things that we can all learn, men, women, children, from my mom. And these are like kind of the two big things that I wanted to point out about my mom. There's a lot about her, but I think we can learn to love like Jesus. And I think that we can learn to have grace like Jesus. So before I get into that, I just want to tell you a little bit about my mom. She was born Tina Marie Nickel, was her maiden name, in Southern California. She was raised by her mother primarily. She didn't have a great or consistent relationship with her father. She did have a couple stepdads, but they didn't really fill that role very well. And so growing up, she had no Christian influence in her life, none to speak of. But when she was 15 years old, walking down Huntington Beach, she was approached by a couple hippie Jesus people who gave her a gospel tract and evangelized to her, and she received Jesus, prayed to receive Jesus that day. And from that day on, she said she took the tract home and she read it over and over and over again. Just this new thing, this new idea of Jesus dying for her sins. And from that point on, I would say she was on a heavenly trajectory. Not a direct path to a surrendered life by any means, but from that point on, she was moving toward Christ. And I've talked to her about this and asked her if that was the point of salvation. And, she doesn't really know the nuts and bolts of it, to be honest. She doesn't know if that was the point of salvation. All she knows is that from that point on, she was convicted of her sin. And though not every decision was made to honor God, and she didn't feel necessarily like she was very close to God at many points, she, from that point on, was being drawn to him. And so do with that what you will, whether she was born again or not. Like I said, not every decision was perfect, like marrying my dad. And I don't say that lightly. She was trying to get married when she was 16, but her mom, who had to give parental consent, said, no, you have to wait till you're at least 17. So 8 days after she turned 17, her and my father got married. Now, she was very independent. She was she started working as a maid at a hotel at 13 years old, and she was a full-time employee as a nurse's assistant at 15 or 16. She tested out of high school, and she was already in the labor force. So she was very independent, strong woman. So she was, in her mind, ready to get married. But I say that it maybe wasn't the best decision, not just because of her age, but because when they did premarital counseling, which was a state-mandated premarital counseling because she was getting married as a minor, the pastor said, would you like to build your marriage with Jesus at the center? You know, he went through this whole program with them, and then at the end he said, would you like to build your marriage with Jesus at the center? And she said, yes, I would. And my dad said, I'm not ready for that. And so she continued to marry him. The pastor did the wedding ceremony. His message during their wedding ceremony was on divorce. So he had his thoughts on their marriage from the beginning. And so, like I said, not every decision was necessarily what I think a godly woman would do. And yet, I asked my dad about that whole situation, and he said, well, yeah, I thought like maybe someday in the future, but for now I kind of like to drink, and I don't want to give up the things that I like, because I know that following Jesus will mean that I won't get to do any of those things anymore. And so he was not into it, but she was. So she became a mother 11 months after her wedding. So that it was actually exactly 11 months after the wedding. So she was still 17. And then she had 2 more boys, my older brother and then myself, over the next 6.5 years. So she raised us to be good kids, to have Christian morals, to have empathy towards others. She would drag us to church pretty much every Christmas and Easter, though my dad confessed later on that he would try to drag his feet on Easter Sunday so that hopefully we would be late and too late for church, to the point where my mom would be embarrassed to walk in. So then maybe we could just go and get some IHOP or some Denny's for breakfast rather than going to church. So he would be trying to pull us away from church while she was trying to take us to church. She would put us in vacation Bible schools as often as she can. She prayed during our childhoods. I didn't know much of it. She would pray in private, and she confessed later on that she didn't pray with confidence knowing that God heard her. She was more praying hoping that God would hear her. She didn't have a very close relationship, but she knew that Jesus was the only thing that could help her in her situation that she was in. So after 20 years of marriage to my father, on the verge of divorce, most likely, God broke into their marriage in this big, huge way. And I've shared with you guys my testimony of being 12 years old and seeing the difference in my parents, from arguing and fighting about alcohol and drinking almost every night, to now almost every night they were sitting down and they were praying together. There were still some arguments over stupid stuff, but there was sitting down and praying together. Instead of my dad being out in the garage and drinking most nights, he was now sitting at a desk, which we had a desk in the house, which was weird, in his bedroom, which was even weirder, and he had books and he would actually read them. So that was a whole new dad for me. And so if my mom had this long winding path towards Christ, my dad had kind of a super highway that as soon as he came to Christ, he was off and running. And he became a pastor of the church that he got saved in 3 years after his conversion. And that put my mom in a position of now being a pastor's wife and a women's ministry leader, which if you are a pastor or know a pastor's wife, there's a lot of a lot of pressure that comes along with being a pastor's wife, because you're looked to kind of be a leader in the church, even if you don't really feel the calling your husband does, as well as you feel a calling to your family, to your husband is called to a larger group of people, to disciple a larger group of people, but he still needs to disciple you and your family. And so there's this tug of war that happens sometimes. And so being newer believers and things, the stress that could cause is great. And so my mom handled that with grace. And so for the last 20 plus years, they've been pastoring a small little church on the Central Coast. And so that's who my mom is in an overview. Now, as I was looking for a way to build this message, I was trying to think of a way to paint a picture for you of who my mom is. It was difficult because there's a million different little things that I want to tell you about. Every single one is a brush stroke that would give you more detail into why it was such a blessing to have a mother the way I did. Every Christmas morning surprise, every batch of chocolate chip cookies on a rainy day, every hour she spent volunteering at the snack bar at the baseball fields. All of those things would make up this picture of who she is, her work ethic, starting a daycare in her home and being up at 6 a.m. to vacuum each morning and sanitize toys and doing all these things that I, to this day, just thinking back, it's like, man, she did so much. But it would be impossible to give you guys this full picture. So I wanted just to focus on those two things that I think we can all learn from. And they're the things that I feel like I want to grow in the most from her example. The things that I look up to her most for, that are most Christ-like and the least Nick-like. And so those two things, that she loves like Jesus and that she has grace like Jesus. And so I have a couple stories to tell you, and then we'll be done. Just a couple stories to explain to you how she loves like Jesus and how she has grace like Jesus. So she loves like Jesus. There's seriously a million ways that she's loved us. Moms, you know how often you choose your kids over yourself. I mean, how many moms made a pact in their 20s, maybe even a blood pact with your friends, that you would never drive a minivan. And yet in your 30s, you willingly, joyfully choose to drive a minivan because your heart is now for your kids and you've forgotten about your own desires and wants. You set them aside completely, all for what's best for your kids. So there's so many things. How about dino nuggets? I don't know a single woman who would choose to purchase dino nuggets, spend $7 on a bag of dinosaur-shaped nuggets. Dinosaur-shaped anything. I don't think any woman would have dinosaur-shaped anything in their house. And yet, women buy those because whatever brings your kids joy or security or safety is now bringing you joy. And so mothers, I think, are this perfect picture, maybe imperfect picture, but a picture of God's love for us, his self-sacrificial, unconditional love. No matter how many times you mess up, your mom's going to love you. So I have one story of that from my brother's life. I asked both my brothers and my dad for some anecdotes and some stories as I was building this so that I could kind of try to see and pick and choose. And one of the most powerful ones was from my brother Chris, who was attending Bible college down at the same college me and Jessica went to before I was there, though. And he was working through the summer. So all the other students had left. Maybe there was a few left that were working like he was, but no friends. The campus was kind of deserted. It's this beautiful tropical oasis of a campus with natural hot springs and hot tubs and all this beautiful stuff going on. And yet, I'll give you the quote in his words. He said, summer of 1999, I went through one of the deepest bouts with depression I have ever had. Mom visited me for 1 week and literally would just sit in silence with me, listen to me cry, and pray with me. Mom and I share those tendencies of melancholy, and I don't know how to explain it. There was just something about her presence and her experience that resonated with me. And from that moment on, I had a deeper connection with her. It definitely solidified an emotional bond between she and I that I still feel to this day. And so my brother having that, when I asked him, that was the story that stuck out. There's a few others in his life, but this was the one that was like, I could just picture my mom sitting enclosed in a dorm room with paradise all around her. There's all these things to go and do. It's like a little Christian paradise down in Southern California with all these palm trees and like I said, there's all these natural hot springs to go, and it's like a spa, but centered around Christ. And you can go there. There's a prayer chapel to go and pray at, and all these things are around her. And she's in one of the stinky dorm rooms with my brother, and she's sitting with him and being with him and caring for him and praying for him. And so I asked my mom if she knew at the time how impactful that would be in Chris's life, or if that made a great impact on her. And she said, nope. And I don't say that to diminish the power of what was being done. I actually share that with you because I hope it encourages you that for your kids, you may not feel like you're moving mountains. You may not feel like you're doing some amazing thing, and yet 20 years later, that's the stuff that your kids remember. That's the stuff that makes the biggest impact on them. For my mom, I don't think that she saw it as a sacrifice at the time. I think that she just felt like she was doing what brought her joy, spending time with her son. And I'm sure there was a bit of a grief that came along with it, knowing that her son was going through an emotional time. But at the same time, I don't think that she saw it as a sacrifice. I don't think that she realized how big of an impact she was having on his life, that 20 years later, he would be recalling that story and saying that I still feel the impact of that week to this day. And so I think that moms, you do that so much. You don't realize how much you impact your kids. I don't think you realize how much your love for them, it's just normal for you to choose your kids over yourself. But sometimes that's what speaks the gospel to your kids the most. And you may feel like you've even failed in some ways, and yet your kids will understand the gospel better because you've been there for them and you've loved them and you've been with them through the ups and downs. I mean, if I wanted to really air out all the dirty laundry of our family, you would see how much my mom has been very much an unconditional lover. No matter what we've done, no matter how bad I've been, no matter how bad, what decisions we've made as kids, my mom has always loved us. And there's never been a question about her love for us. And that is so like God, so like Jesus. It's exactly the way he loves us. And then the second thing, that she has grace like Jesus. And this has more to do with her relationship with her dad. Like I said, he didn't have a very consistent relationship with her in her life. She had seasons where she would spend a little more time with him and a little less, but he didn't really ever make an effort to be in her life. The first story that I could share from the first time of her life would be that he took my grandma to the hospital to have my mom. And once my mom was born, they spend the time in the recovery and all of that. And so he left them at the hospital and he went to go spend time with his mistress. And when it came time for my grandma to take my mom home in her arms, he wasn't willing to come or able to come because he was too busy. And so he sent a taxi to go pick up my mom as an infant from the hospital. And so from day one, he was very much interested in his own life and putting himself above his family and especially her. And so now my mom didn't let that dissuade her necessarily. I knew him as Grandpa Elvis because he was a big Elvis fan. His name's Jim, but somehow he got called Grandpa Elvis early on, and it just stuck. So my mom made an effort to pursue that relationship with him, even into her adulthood. He actually didn't want her to get married, which is understandable, but he refused to give her away and refused to even go to the wedding. And so that hurt my mom for a while. But by the time I came around, we had a relationship with him, though he never made any attempts to come and visit us, to be part of our lives. We would always have to go and sit around whatever condo he was living at or wherever he was at and kind of sit with him while he drank bourbon, and we just kind of would sit around as a family kind of waiting for the time to go by so that we could leave. I remember being a kid and being like, do we have to go? But my mom consistently pursued a relationship with him. And once she came to Christ, I think pursued that relationship even more so and shared the gospel with him on a regular basis. And he rejected the gospel. He rejected it fiercely. I remember a couple times as I got older, there was some tense conversations when they were trying to share the gospel with him. And he didn't want anything to do with Jesus. And so my mom, with that background of that relationship, forgave her dad very early on. Forgave her dad for all the hurts he had caused her. Now, he didn't ask for that forgiveness. He didn't ask for it. He didn't deserve it. But just like Jesus, she forgave him without him deserving it, without him asking to be forgiven. That's huge. I mean, that is crazy grace. The one person in your life, right, that should love you and take care of you and always be pursuing you is your dad, your mom, your dad, your parents. Those relationships should be the most secure relationships in your life. And to have those relationships not be solid because of the selfishness of your parent, because he doesn't care enough, and yet you forgive him and you pursue the relationship with him. To me, it's mind-boggling. It brings me to the verse of where it says, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. With no strings attached, with no promise that we would receive him or that it would be, it's like, well, if you guys ask for forgiveness, then I'll come down and I'll die for you. No, that's not the way it was. He came and died for us and offered forgiveness. And so in that way, my mom offered forgiveness to someone who didn't ask for it, didn't care for it. And yet, as he got older, he softened. And he softened to the point where he asked for forgiveness. And he said, Tina, I should have been at your wedding. And to see him soften in that way, it's just this crazy picture of us being super rebellious and hard-hearted toward God, and yet he is constantly pursuing us, putting different people in our path to try to tell us that he loves us and that he's forgiven us and he wants us. And my mom did that to her father, which to me it should be the other way around. The father should be reaching out and pursuing the child, and yet that's not the way this relationship worked. And so it's just this amazing picture of me, of grace, that she forgave him, and he even has prayed to receive Christ. And so, like my dad said, if he's actually in heaven, if that was a real thing, and if he's actually there, then it's only due to the example of love that my mom has been to him, that she has been literally the Bible that he's read, because he's seen her heart and her life, and he would be responding as much to her as he is to Jesus himself. And so while we were sinners, Christ died for us. And my mom, while her dad was a sinner, she forgave him. And that to me speaks just so powerfully into my life, that you don't have to require people they don't owe you anything. You just behave the way Jesus behaved. You just love people. You just extend grace upon grace upon grace. You love them. And God will do the rest. He will figure out who deserves it and who doesn't deserve it. And in the end, there will be a judgment. And so, gosh, we're not called to that. We are called to just extend grace, especially to those who are in our families, who are close to us. Love them. Extend grace to them. We're going to mess up. Your parents are going to mess up, kids. Your kids are going to mess up big time. Your siblings, aunts and uncles, love them. Pursue the relationship. Pursue reconciliation, even if they don't want it. Be there. I hope that those stories honor my mom first and foremost. I hope that she would be honored by me telling them. I did ask for her permission, but I didn't tell her that this whole thing would kind of be about her. Kind of just asked if I could share some of the things from her life. So I hope that I know she's going to watch this. So Mom, I hope you were blessed by this. I hope you felt honored by this. But I hope that all of you are blessed by it and encouraged by my mom's life. And like I said, it was a winding path that brought her to where she is now. And I'm sure she wouldn't have chosen that path with everything she knows now. She wouldn't have taken the same path, I'm sure of it. But I hope that wherever you're at in your life, that maybe you're on the winding path, that you can come to Jesus and he can do a lot in a short amount of time. If you're in your 30s or even your 40s like my dad was 40 years old, God can do something, and he can do something big, and it will impact your kids even if they're grown. So I hope that you guys are all encouraged by that. I hope that if you're a mother, that you feel encouraged. That my mom, there's lots of weird little things that I remember and am blessed by all these years later. And that your kids, all the little sacrifices and all the little things that you do for them now, someday they'll probably be thankful, and they'll probably give you the appreciation that maybe they don't now. And so with that, I'd like to just read, like I said, the kind of the answers to the survey that I asked the 4 moms to give me, because I think that it's good stuff, and so I wanted you guys to hear it. So, moms, the theme through all of the answers was grace. God's grace is sufficient for you. You will mess up. You will have failures, but it's okay to ask for forgiveness, even from your kids. Let your kids see your walk with God. God planned for you, with all your strengths and weaknesses, to be the mother of your children. Mothering isn't a race. There's no winners or losers. Chores can wait, because it's all about loving and caring for your kids. So have grace for yourself, for your kids, but most of all, pray for your kids and cherish the time when they're young, because it goes by fast. And dads, this is what the mothers would like you to know, so keep an ear out. But actually, this is where the answers varied the most, and I saw the most personality come out, where it really depended on the man they were married to, and what, like, they varied the most. So I would encourage you guys to, dads, ask your wife, ask her, say, hey, give me 3 ways that I can best love you, support you, and honor you. Not just today on Mother's Day, but every day, because they were so different for all the different women I asked. So you would do well to ask your woman how you can honor her. But there was one theme that came through in every answer, and that was to bear the responsibility of raising children with your wife. To not to leave her to rear the children while you work and pursue your hobbies, but to be as much a part of the daily routines as you can be. Dads, do that. Not just for your wife's sake, but for your kids' sake as well, please. And kids, are any kids listening right now? Niños, listen close. I need you guys to listen to me. This is the end. This is the very end of the sermon. This is the last thing you guys need to listen to. So kids, listen up. This is what the moms wanted you guys to know. That your mom loves you. Like, loves you. Like, super duper duper loves you. She will do anything for you. She really does want what's best for you. And every decision she makes is so that you will be blessed. Teenagers, get off your phone. Listen to me. Respect your mom. Like, for real, respect your mom. She loves you so much, even though you annoy her to no end. She still does so much in her life to make your life better, even though you don't usually show any type of appreciation. So in return, just don't be a jerk. Ask her how you can show your appreciation to her and do things to help her. Does that sound good, teenagers? All right, that's all I have today. Thank you guys so much for being here live. Those of you who watch it later, hopefully you can reach out to your mothers and say Happy Mother's Day, even if it's a day or two late. But God bless. Love you guys. Let's pray. I didn't pray to start, so let's pray to close. Lord Jesus, thank you so much for being the perfect parent. God, for being the definition of love, the definition of grace. God, for showing us what real love looks like. God, and I thank you for my mom and for the fleshed out live version of love and of grace that I've gotten to witness, even into my adulthood. God, I pray that you would help us to be more like my mom, to grow in our love for one another and in our grace for one another, and God, that you would be with us as we honor our mothers on this day. God, bless all the moms out there, especially the moms with little ones who maybe don't even understand how much they will appreciate their moms later. God, be with them. We love you. Thank you so much for who you are. In Jesus' name, amen. God bless.